even write an article about the actual fight itself. I wrote an article about the Diaz brothers. But I thought by the time this fight started, I thought, thank God this is going to be over at the end, and we can get back to business as normal. And as soon as the fight was over, I was ready to call for number 3. I was ready for the trilogy. So a really amazing fight, won me over, and a very rare thing because it was one of those fights that reaches outside of the MMA sphere and gets people in, but it wasn't like a one-sided squash match, like Ronda Rousey appealed to the world at large because her fights could be put into GIF form, basically. Whereas this fight got people in and was amazing and went the distance and was hard fought the entire time. The only people who are going to be upset by this are, like the McGregor superfan, that Australian weirdo who always shows up dressed as McGregor. But good for him, he's packed on some muscle since the first time he turned up, so obviously trying to beat Conor McGregor has helped his life. But yeah, the only people who are going to be disappointed by this fight are the ones who expected a one-sided blowout. Either the people who thought that Diaz would just do it again even easier, or the people who thought that Conor McGregor was going to rise to the occasion and finish him straight away. What you got was one of those amazing fights where it is in stanzas. You can see the whole thing unfolding. Mark Hunt versus Junior Dos Santos was one like that, where one guy would be trying something and it would be working, and then the other guy would make an adjustment, and then the other guy would have to adjust, and then the last guy to adjust basically ends up at the end looking like the worst one. But we'll be talking about that fight more in a minute. We're going to do some listener mail. We're going to recap that fight. We're going to do the rest of the UFC 202 card. And Jesus Christ, I've just checked, and Condit versus Maia is this weekend, so we'll probably try and have a look at that too. Let's get into it. But before we go on, a little bit about my Patreon page. I have a Patreon page. You can go to Patreon and search Jack Slack or Fights Gone By, which is the name of this podcast, by the way. I know a lot of people think it's just the Jack Slack podcast. No, it's the Fights Gone By podcast. If you go to Patreon, you can donate $5, and that will get you in for a bonus episode each month. That's going to be a history episode. I'm having tremendous fun writing the first one. You're going to learn a lot about a very strange time in fighting. A time when you could have a boxing match and advertise strapping explosives to a bull as the co-main event. No, it's not about Bellator. It's about ye olde England. So look forward to that. It's going to be good. At any rate, everything you donate helps me keep this podcast independent, helps me spend time on this as opposed to just writing articles, and is just very much appreciated. So I ain't begging, but if you want to throw some money our way, I won't complain. Let's get into some listener mail. First question from Wolf. Why do we see the head and arm throw in WMMA more often than in MMMA? in women's MMA rather than men's MMA, I'm going to assume that means. Is it because Rousey made it work? I would guess so. It does happen an awful lot in women's MMA. You'll see women throwing each other down by the headlock, sort of in the Haraigoshi sort of style, the judo hip throw, but also in sort of like the old school wrestling headlock style, which you don't see attempted much in men's mixed martial arts. Some notable examples I can think of in men's MMA are, Cairo Parisian used to hit them occasionally. Nate Diaz went for a couple against Dong Hyun Kim and ended up giving his back. And that's the great danger with any sort of headlock throw. You're a few inches away from being in between a great position and a really, really bad position. And it happened at UFC 202 again. It was Randa Marcus. Marcus threw her with the head and arm, and wound up in what's called Kezagatami, the scarf hold, and ended up giving her back up. Because the difference between a scarf hold and a headlock is having the elbow, having the near elbow. If you're controlling that elbow, you're in a great position. If you're not, you've basically given up your back. Ronda Rousey's success was because she threw into excellent positions. You very rarely saw Ronda Rousey throw into the guard or take her opponent down into guard, because she just didn't do a lot of that. Like she didn't pass guard especially well. She got tied up by Miesha Tate in guard and by Liz Carmouche for a while. What she did well was throwing straight into a dominant position like Keizakatami, and then advancing into a submission or into the mount or other bad places. But even Ronda Rousey, a top quality judoka. Even she ended up giving up her back to Liz Carmouche in her first fight in the UFC, because once you lose that elbow or all that head starts to slip out, you've basically given up your back. Billy Robinson, who trained Sakuraba, I sang his praises last week when I was saying I would have loved to train with him. Amazing catch wrestler, amazing professional wrestler. When he was wrestling amateurs town to town, back in the day when, you know, the sort of carnival wrestler was a thing, he said that giving the opponent the headlock was often a good thing to do because they felt like they were in control, and he could sort of milk it and make it look like the local guy was having a chance against him. But, you know, always be in position to pick that guy up and suplex him if he wanted to. So headlocks, outside of, you know, sports where if you get the takedown, that's the end of it, they kind of suck, to be honest. Even the other day, I can't remember who it was, submitted Jessamine Duke, one of the 4 horsewomen. You remember them? They were the big stable in women's MMA for a while. Jessamine Duke got thrown down and submitted with one of those old school style scarf hold arm bars between the legs. And to be fair, Randa Marcus did it to Felice Herrig too and submitted her from that position. Without getting squeamish, we can mention that women's bodies are obviously shaped differently to men. It could be that having breasts makes it harder to slide out of the bottom of that position. I don't know. You know, obviously none of us are going to be able to try both. Oh, except that one, Fallon Fox, the one who caused all the stir a while ago. Another great example, Paige Van Zandt, used to throw people down by the headlock all the time. Got by basically on her aggression. As soon as she fought Rose Namajunas, another one of those names that I've heard before, but I can't remember what people actually said. Thug Rose. As soon as Paige fought Rose, she ended up giving her back multiple times. So I think there's a place for it in MMA, in both men's and women's MMA, but I think that it is being overused in the women's game at the moment, and it's just not. It's like a right-hand lead, you know. It's surprising when you do it occasionally, and it works really well when it's a surprise. But if all you ever do is go for headlocks and hip throws, you're going to give up your back very, very quickly if you start fighting people who recognise that. Should Jones have to work his way back to a title shot after all the drama of late? Maybe he needs to win too. Thoughts? That's from Lucky Lloyd. Obviously, we have to be careful with the John Jones situation because it is coming out that, you know, there's more to it than we all thought originally, or they found a supplement to claim that that's the way. It looks like it's going to turn out to be like another tainted supplement deal or something like that. They'll probably settle on like a short suspension or something like that. But to be honest, for what my opinion's worth, I feel like as long as Daniel Cormier has the title, John Jones shouldn't get a shot at it. As much as I wanted to see John Jones versus Cormier too, and as much as I thought John Jones would probably have the edge in that fight, I feel like Daniel Cormier is an almost 40-year-old dude who's suffering increasing wear and tear on his body, and John Jones wasted a good deal of his athletic life preparing for that fight, wasting everyone's time. Unless it comes out that he's all clear and, you know, someone injected him in his sleep with something, then I think the case is probably that John Jones should have known what he was putting into his body. He's a professional athlete, and it was his fault that the fight fell through. So I'd be quite happy for him to not get another shot at Daniel Cormier. If Daniel Cormier loses the belt, sure thing, put John Jones in with whoever. It's just, it seems like it's unfair to keep asking Daniel Cormier to prepare for Jones when the guy's life is a train wreck and he keeps sort of driving himself off the rails. So let's jump in on the reason we're all here. Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz. Terrific fight. I said that already in the introduction, but I just wanted to underscore once again that I loved this. It was a fight in which one man came in specifically prepared for his opponent's shortcomings. Nate Diaz's shortcomings are pretty well known by now. It's not like it's not like back when I was writing articles, a guest article on Cage Potatoes saying this Nick Diaz, he can't deal with low kicks very well to the outside of his lead leg, and no one was believing me. No, now it's been shown dozens and dozens of times. The Diaz brothers stand with their lead foot toed in. They really struggle with the low kicks, and Conor McGregor came in prepared to abuse that. You'll recall in the first episode of this podcast, we talked about methods in which the smaller man can mitigate a range advantage. And one of the ones we pointed to was attacking a nearer target with a longer weapon. When Conor McGregor was simply swinging for Diaz's head with his left hand, he was having to reach all the way, and Diaz was leaning back too, which really made it difficult. But in this fight, Conor McGregor started attacking that lead leg early and really stuck with it. And not only does it break Diaz's stance and get him out of position, allowing Conor McGregor to follow up with punches if he wanted to, eventually the fighter being kicked has to start checking. It created a range disparity the other way. So where Nate Diaz's boxing was longer than, or boxing arsenal was longer than Conor McGregor's, Conor McGregor now had the longest weapon in the fight because Nate Diaz kicked so little and so ineffectively. For the most part, he did actually bring back that front kick to the body later, which I really like, and it was really good. But what you saw was, rather than waiting for McGregor to come to him, as he did in the first fight, and then started connecting those checking hooks, slaps, coming back with the 1-2, this time around, he suddenly had this urgency that he needed to start closing the distance, and he'd start reaching out with the jab and coming in behind it, and every time he stuck it out there, McGregor would hit a cross parry, which is lead hand to lead hand on the inside, and fire the left hand over the top. And Diaz went to the body jab as well, which is a nice long weapon. The uppercut wasn't there this time because clearly that was something that McGregor had been preparing for Dos Anjos. Because in the first fight they kept calling for it, and he threw a couple when Diaz was coming in with the body jab, and Diaz abandoned that shortly after. But this time he was looking for left hands across the top of the body jab, it can be hard to do because you've got like an iron rod from their shoulder to your stomach, and you're trying to connect over the top of their head. And if they're punching right in front of their shoulder, they're obviously getting their longest reach, whereas you're trying to punch wherever their head is. But yeah, so McGregor began the fight by kicking from the outside, and then Diaz had to close the distance, and every time he tried to close the distance with the jab, McGregor would counter with the left hand. And then things changed a little bit when Diaz stopped trying to come in behind his jab and actually just put up the double forearms guard and started walking down McGregor. Because where he'd been coming in offering an opening every time, now he wasn't, and every time McGregor started throwing back at him, he'd be drawn into exchanges rather than nice, clean counter punches and moving away. It was really interesting to see Diaz realize that was what was necessary, because they do have such a bad reputation for being adaptive fighters. But that was very impressive that he realized, okay, I'm getting picked off coming in. Why don't I just put my gloves up and get in on the inside to brawl? And you saw McGregor get very uncomfortable there. He started rushing these low kicks while moving backwards. And that time that it looked like Diaz had basically knocked him down, but the fence kept him up. That was because McGregor was on one leg when Diaz stepped in and hit him. Then we got to the fence, and Diaz was doing lovely work along there. We were talking about the single underhook control with the head in front of the opponents, and then punching sort of in front of your own head with your free hand. That was really annoying him in the first fight, annoying McGregor in the first fight, and he looked really well prepared for that in this fight. He was using the biceps tie, which is a really old technique. Like, even if you watch Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight champion of the world, he was doing that on the very earliest fight films. He was just both gloves on top of his opponent's biceps, cupping over them, stopping them from punching him on the inside, and keeping them in nice and close so that they would try and punch and tire themselves out. So McGregor was going bicep ties on the free hand, landing nice knees to the body with his back to the fence, which was really impressive. And then he'd start breaking his hips out to the side that Diaz had his hand free, and then he'd roll the elbow over the top and move straight in on the underhook, and then continue turning him. The elbows were a really nice touch. That was something that he went to even more when when he realized that Diaz was coming in behind the double forearms rather than offering him the counters. Elbows against the Diaz brothers especially are going to be a great idea because they bleed so much. They've got all that scar tissue around their face. And if you are, it's wrong to judge a fight on who's bleeding the most. The old Lennox Lewis, look at his face, because some people just bleed far more than others. Anderson Silva has skin like adamantium, but Fedor Emelianenko would cut like a light breeze would cut him open. It's just Ferdy Pacheco, Muhammad Ali's doctor, used to think that It was the amount of melanin in your skin affected how easily you cut from blows. And there's a whole pseudoscience around cuts in general. Like Kid McCoy famously thought that you could cut people open by twisting your fist just on the end of your punch and stuff like that. But cuts are a really valuable weapon because of the blood. You saw by the end of the fight, or in fact by the third and fourth round, Diaz was stopping to mop the blood out of his face. And if a fighter is doing that, that's not like a twitch. They're not doing it for no reason. It's because there's blood in their eyes. On the subject of Diaz and stuff in their eyes, you'll remember the second KJ Noons Nick Diaz fight. KJ Noons came in with this like surfer boy haircut. He was looking good, to be fair. Good looking lad. But he'd stop every exchange to like mop his own hair out of his face. And Nick Diaz started to realise this and would just wait for him to do it and start punching him. It was really frustrating. But yeah, getting blood in someone's eyes is a tremendous advantage, because a lot of the times a fighter pumps out a jab, it's just to obscure the vision directly in front of the opponent's face. You're not even trying to like close their eyes with the jab, you're just trying to put something in their vision so that you can move in behind it. And if there's blood in their eyes, that's like having a jab out there all the time, you know? So elbows, great decision by McGregor. Very good weekend for elbows, actually. Tim Means was doing gnarly work with his elbows, and he really demonstrated how a very short elbow is still enough to slice a dude wide open. And that was directly above the brow, and it was going in his opponent's eyes the whole time. It was just, and the guy couldn't see any of the blows coming after that. And then, of course, Brock Lesnar in his pro wrestling match at SummerSlam with Randy Orton, hardway elbowed him. They apparently agreed that Brock Lesnar was going to legit elbow him and open his head up. And to be fair to Brock Lesnar, he did it really well. Like, it took, I think it was 2 attempts he took, and he got it just so that it snacked across the top of the brow. It wasn't like a full forearm connection. It was just one of those ones that dings off the top and opens up a huge gash on the head. And it was pretty scary to watch. I don't know why the WWE would do that in the middle of being sued by a load of athletes who have brain damage, but they've also banned blading, which was the safe equivalent of drawing blood. So they're a very strange crew, and the way they treat Brock Lesnar is kind of like the way the UFC treated Brock Lesnar. Brock gets his own rules, which everyone else hates. But back to McGregor versus Diaz. The elbows along the cage from McGregor were really nice. And the way he began to counter that double forearms walking forward guard was in about the fourth round, he realised that Diaz's body was wide open every time he did it, because obviously you've got no big gloves to hide behind, you're not boxing. So we're talking Diaz's wrists and elbows were coming up to make the shield in front of him. So his entire body was exposed, and in the fourth round, McGregor put in this front kick, the same one that he used to win Chad Mendes, the front snap kick, put in a beautiful one of those, and Diaz's hands immediately dropped. A few moments later, landed a nice double hook to the body, and he was just starting to work in combination and get away from Diaz before the brawls happened. A really back and forth fight, terrific stuff. The one that's divisive this morning is the running away. I mean, if you're still hung up on people running away, like, that should instantly mean they lose the fight or that they're a coward. You're an idiot, because they're in a ring, they've chosen to be in a ring with someone else, and immediately afterwards they're coming back with punches. I just can't get on board with people when they say, oh, Overeem was running from Roy Nelson, Carlos Condit was running from Nick Diaz, so on and so forth. And the most annoying thing is when people pretend that it's impossible to stop someone from running from you, because it's not. The Diazes have a long history of struggling to stop people from circling out, and that became running when they got frustrated and started going, oh, everyone's running from us. Because they're undefeated in their minds, to be fair. Basically, the very narrow stance that the Diazes employ, in addition to making them very vulnerable to low kicks, also means that they have very limited lateral movement, which is what you need to cut the ring, and furthermore, their lead shoulder is directly in front of them. It's 12 o'clock, whereas in a more square stance, your lead shoulder, is out to the side a bit, and you've got all that space that you can hook into with your lead hand to stop the opponent from circling around. You can't hook past your lead shoulder with any sort of power or authority. So as soon as your lead shoulder is like side on with the opponent, If they get past it, they're pretty much home free. And you saw that over and over again in Diaz versus Condit. But the example I would use of how hard it is to actually run from someone who cuts the ring well is Matt Brown. Matt Brown's lost fights before. He's lost fights when guys counter him coming in, like Ellenberger, and Robbie Lawler did a great job of doing that right off the bat and getting him sort of timid, and then Matt Brown started doing like an in-out kickboxing thing, which just isn't his style at all. But I want you to think of like Eric Silva. He was literally trying to run from Matt Brown, and Matt Brown was having none of it, because every time Eric Silva or anyone else, Jordan Mean, anyone like that, started to move away from Matt Brown, he would throw a long round kick just on their arm and immediately come in behind it with punches. Because as soon as you can throw a strike, even if it's blocked, that's something that the opponent can't move through. You can't move through someone's shin bone. So watch a Matt Brown fight, watch how many high kicks he throws just to stop the guy in his tracks, and then comes in behind them with elbows and those trips and stuff. And that's something that the Diazes could benefit from. Or watch a Julio Cesar Chavez fight if you want to watch how to do it with just the hands. Obviously, it's a little bit harder in the cage because you don't have the severe corners of a boxing ring, but you also have kicks, which make ring cutting so much easier. If you can kick, there's no reason anyone should be able to run away from you. What's more, if a fighter is circling out repeatedly, they should be having a hard time doing it. If you watch Eddie Alvarez versus Michael Chandler, or actually against Rafael Dos Anjos, or any good boxer, any good ring general in boxing, they change direction a lot. Floyd Mayweather versus Marcos Maidana is a great example. He would be moved towards the ropes, he would pretend he was moving out one way, and then go back the other. In fact, there were times when he was like triple or quadruple feinting, because you've got to get the other guy's feet moving ahead of you to cut off the ring in a direction that you're not actually going to move, or swing in that direction at least, and give you time to escape out the other way. It's a psychology game, or it should be, and it just wasn't in this one. Conor McGregor could just move the one direction, and Diaz would stick out his finger and go, "Oh, he's running," like that was going to help him. Referees are generally very reluctant to take points for timidity, especially if like the dude runs out and then immediately comes back in with a punch while you're pointing at him. If you want to see a real example of refusal to engage, the last round of Anderson Silva versus Damian Maia was one of the worst. That was the one where Anderson Silva didn't want to engage him properly for most of the fight, so he threw lots of low-line straight kicks and things like that, and did lots of dancing around. And then in the fifth round, he'd gassed himself out from dancing around, and then he was just running. And I think it was Dan Murgliata in that fight, but he actually stopped it and said, "I'm taking a point off you." But at any rate, running was not... Well, even if you consider the jogging that McGregor was doing, running away like an act of cowardice, it was Diaz's job to stop him. Because if you're hurt, your job is to move away, and then re-engage and win another round, or whatever. And then the fifth round was terrific too. Diaz had a lot of success with the... he didn't have so much success with the single underhook along the fence, but he did have a lot of success with what his elder brother does, Nick Diaz, with the head in front of the opponent's head or underneath it, and freeing both hands to hit the body, the real old school infighting stuff. John Jones does most of his hurting there now, against Daniel Cormier and Glover Teixeira, and against Ovince St. Preux. It's just such a dominant position. It's a terrific position to work from. It's like having someone pinned to the mat, but you're standing so that you've got both your legs, your hips, you can get the whole body into the punches, and you're working on their body, which is a target which really pays dividends down the stretch. I hope we're entering an era where fighters realise the value of that, because when you're actually allowed to push the opponent around, you should be infighting along the fence a lot. And the guys who are doing it have been eating other guys alive. Even Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, who was a punching bag for most of his career, just not a very defensively savvy boxer. An absolute hero, terrific at taking the punishment and coming back, but just dreadful on the feet. Even he started to have much greater success when he adopted the sort of press them to the fence, get your head under theirs, free your arms and start hitting the body method. He did it to Frank Mir in their second fight, even though Mir was in much better shape than him at that point. He beat Mir up along the fence in that fight. And then in the fight with Fabricio Verdum, he had tremendous success from that position, even though Verdum went on to become the world champion like a couple of months later, or a year later, or something like that. It's a position which really stifles people, and you can actually get some real hurting blows in from there. it's not like a wall and stall. It's actually working, and a great position. Returning to the low kicks for a minute, one of the things that Diaz had success with in the first fight was leaning away and taking the power off of McGregor's long left hands. And because Diaz is taller and longer and fights in that long stance, McGregor was really having to reach for it and getting hit with check hooks, and a lot of the power was being lost on the punches. By kicking Diaz's lead leg over and over again, Diaz was forced to start picking that leg up. He had to get light on it. And getting light on the lead leg obviously means putting more weight on the rear leg, which means bringing the rear leg further up underneath you. The way that Diaz leans away from shots is by having that nice long stance and leaning back onto his rear leg. So in forcing Diaz to shorten his stance and lighten his lead leg, McGregor effectively took away the lean. And you can see this in one of the knockdowns. He kicks the leg a few times. Diaz starts picking the leg up, and his rear leg's directly underneath him in his stance, in between the picking up of the lead leg. And then he goes to pick up his lead leg one more time and catches left hand over the top, and his head is just there for it. He's none of the leaning, none of the rolling with it that he did in the first fight. And that's one of the real advantages of kicking the lead leg. If you can get the guy picking his leg up, he's anchored to the floor on the other leg. It's a great lesson for guys who are fighting someone who's leaning away. It's a great lesson for people fighting people who move a lot. There's very few instances where kicking the leg isn't going to be a good thing. And I was getting people emailing me before this fight saying, look at this, Conor McGregor's low kicks. He doesn't throw very good low round kicks. And there was some footage online of him kicking a bag, very tired, not very good form. And that's the thing that people don't seem to understand. You don't need good low kicks to benefit from using low kicks. It's not like if you're going to try and leg lock someone, where going to leg lock someone actively takes you into the position where you could be leg locked. Low kicks are a tool. You don't have to put the years and years of learning the timing and the setups and the counter low kicks that Ernesto Hoost used to make them like an elite level weapon. You just have to be able to throw them and confident throwing them to make them work for you. Rick Story was low kicking with Donald Cerrone, and it was working because he was picking Cerrone's legs up, and he could have been moving in after it. He was having trouble with well, we'll move on to that fight now, I guess. What really made the difference once again was Donald Cerrone's intercepting knee. Rick Story ate a couple of those on the way in, and suddenly he just wasn't so keen to push in on Cerrone anymore. Got stuck on the end of his reach. It was Cerrone's body shots making the difference, not Story's. He couldn't get into range to do his own with any real effect. And then the finishing combination was just gorgeous. The right hand to the body, and then I think it was a left hook to the head, and then the right high kick. And Jesus Christ, does Story have a chin on him, because he takes this shin bone to the face and then he's turning around and Donald Cerrone is swarming in on him, and it looked like he couldn't remember how to fall down. It was it was a hard kick he took in the head. Great performance for Cerrone. Rick Story is as tough as they come, and his entire career has been built around being matched up with the next big thing and then making the next big thing not the next big thing anymore. So Cerrone getting through that is a really good sign for his career. And talking of low kicks, Lorenz Larkin, fantastic performance. Using that beautiful heel kick to the body. We're calling it the oblique kick, and everyone online is arguing about the term oblique kick. I heard Paul Vunak, whatever his name is, the Jeet Kune Do guy, calling the kick to the knee the oblique kick years ago, like on VHS. I learned it as a category, but fuck it, just call it a heel kick. Nobody cares. Who is getting that worked up about nomenclature? Names. But it was really cool to see him using that heel kick to the body. Frankly, we could call it the Larkin kick, because I don't think I've seen anyone else using it to any real effect. And he was sending Magny flying with those, and then he was using the low kicks to the back of the calf. Magny was also fighting in with a rather turned-in side-on stance. And I think that was to make use of his jab, because Magny's reach is so severe for the weight class. Larkin did the Rob Kamen thing where you kick the other guy in the leg so hard that you burst your own shin open, it starts bleeding, and then you just keep kicking him, and the blood on Magny's leg was coming from Larkin's own shin. But it was amazing to see Larkin. You remember last week in our podcast I was pretty skeptical. I said I love watching Lawrence Larkin, but he's got no urgency at all. And what did he come out showing? You know, he showed he wanted to beat this guy up quickly. And it's done wonders for his career. Now we're all going, oh, Lawrence Larkin, he's a force at welterweight. If he'd won the split decision or the close decision again, I don't think we'd care. But, you know, you can make a statement with your actions in the cage. It's not the wins and losses on the record that matter so much. Artem Lobov, he impressed me. Yeah, well, I had we had a little laugh about it last week. I said, he's not the best fighter in the world, but he'll be interesting. And he came out with similar game plan to McGregor in the main event. But his low kicks were pounding in. Obviously, they've been working at the same stuff in camp. Beaten up Chris Avila, just knocked him all over the ring. Great performance by Artem Lobov. You know, there may be, as much as we have already capped his potential in our minds, you know, there's room there for surprise, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he has in his next fight. Cody Garbrandt versus Takeya Mizugaki. Oh, I mean, if you're building a highlight reel and you want to let Dominic Cruz call you out, that's a great fight. But if you want to learn something about Cody Garbrandt, not a great fight. Didn't really tell us anything except that he hits really hard and still sort of runs in behind his right hand. But then you get into the area of, do you take a round or two just to show that you can? Or do you try and finish the fight as quickly as possible so that you're not in there risking getting knocked out? Though Mizugaki doesn't really knock very many dudes out. He's not a huge puncher. I don't know. If I'm Dominic Cruz, I'm salivating because at the moment I've seen nothing of Cody Garbrandt that says he's going to be able to cut the ring on me. I've seen that he loves running in behind his right hand, and that he comes in on a straight line. And if you've watched the fight with Marcus Brimage, he also falls for feints quite a lot. Doesn't really like when guys change level on him. I mean, obviously, I'm willing to be surprised. You know, he could come out and knock out Dominic Cruz in like 10 seconds or something, or he could put on the performance of his life and outwork Dominic Cruz for the 5 rounds. But at the moment, I would not say I'm super hyped to see him in a title fight. I'd rather see the rematch with Dillashaw, which we've all sort of forgotten for some reason, even though it was a really close, really good fight. Anything that keeps Uriah Faber away from another shot at that belt, you know, I'm happy with. Tim Means we've already talked about. Mike Perry versus Hyun-Gyu Lim. Lim I wrote about a while ago. God, that must have been ages ago. That was Tarek Safadin's first fight in the UFC. Yeah. I mean, what more do you say? If Lim's game was on the level of his weight cutting, he'd be amazing. But at the moment, he's just a dude who cuts a ton of weight and doesn't really have an awful lot of skills to back it up. You know, he's a very upright striker, very wooden striker. I mean, he's really strong. He, like, from what I remember of his victories, he's just sort of muscle dudes around and need him. And when he does hit, he can hit really hard. But that's more by being huge than by setting him up well. Mike Perry is now the world's favourite heel. He was just absolutely bizarre at the weigh-ins, like, went to fake a handshake and then was like, come on, man! And then his corner was super racist on the microphones before the fight, saying that Lim couldn't even open his eyes. Yeah, fucking awful people, shame on them. And then he went on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani, and he seems to really be completely oblivious to what an arse he's coming across, Mike Perry. He's living his gimmick, I suppose. Great heel. He's going to get some real heat in the future. And finally, Anthony Johnson versus Glover Teixeira. The one that last week I said, Glover Teixeira, he always leads with that overhand right, and he always leaves his chin out there afterwards. If I were Anthony Johnson, I'd consider working the counter uppercut. Wasn't a catch and pitch uppercut, but it was an uppercut while Glover Teixeira was throwing his head violently forward to prepare to overhand again. You know, we all know what Glover Teixeira is going to do. We have for a while. Anthony Johnson knew what he was going to do, prepared for it, and it played perfectly into his own game. Devastating knockout. Looks amazing on his record. Looks amazing on the highlight films. They're talking about a match with John Jones now. I'd really enjoy that. I mean, I saw nothing new that would say that he's got a good chance against Daniel Cormier or any other fighter who can get out of the first round with him, to be honest, and still be a threat in the wrestling. But a good performance nonetheless, and he was super cool on the mic afterwards, told the crowd off for booing DC. Why is everyone still booing DC? He's a really cool guy. But that was the show. UFC 202, really, actually, very good card. I mean, I came in very skeptical. I was like, you know, depends how much you care about McGregor Diaz. And all the other fights held up, and the McGregor Diaz fight was even better than anyone hoped. So let's get on to next week's fights. So in terms of fights this weekend, we got a UFC on Fox event and we got a Bellator event. UFC on Fox card is headlined by Carlos Condit and Damian Maia. That's a terrific fight. I was thinking Carlos Condit's career was sort of winding down when he fought Thiago Alves. Really didn't look very impressive. And then he lost to Tyron Woodley. And he was getting lit up in that fight, even though people want to remember it as him being plucked from the air early by a knee injury. He was getting blasted with the right hands. But then he got that sort of title shot with Robbie Lawler as a favour for time served and put on the fight of his life. And a lot of people thought that he probably won that fight, or should have, or would have scored it that way. I think I probably would have. I can't remember what I actually did score it. But yeah, he astounded me in that fight. He's always been a dangerous guy. His striking is hard and crafty, but not always the most technically sharp. His ground game is tremendous. He works wonderful elbows out of the clinch. I think I've called him an opportunist before. He's probably the best sort of, if you give him an opening to finish, he'll finish sort of guy. So he doesn't always win all the rounds. He's not a really controlling sort of fighter, but he can finish from almost anywhere. Meanwhile, Damian Maia is, of course, the greatest jiu-jitsu player in MMA today. I mean, you could throw Jacare in there with him, but it's one of those two. And they used to compete with each other in competitions, and if you stand them next to each other, they look like 2 weight classes apart now, though Jacare is just a big middleweight. Maia is on a tremendous streak of submissions and decisions. Who's he beaten? He's beaten Matt Brown, Gunnar Nelson, Neil Magny, Ryan LaFleur, Alexander Yakovlev. So 3 of those are awesome. But he had the losses to Rory McDonald and Jake Shields, obviously. His trouble has always been in having a full game. There was a while when he wanted to be K1 Maia, because he's friends with Vanderlei Silva, and I assume he spars a lot. And like the Mark Munoz fight, he was actually doing pretty well on the feet in that one. But he's done a lot better since he's basically just stuck to the wrestling and the jiu-jitsu and refused to give it up for anyone. One of the wonderful things about Maia, definitely check out Gamble Dub and BJJ Scout's work on him, because he's a fascinating technical study. One of the really interesting things about him is that his sweeps from the bottom are mainly just coming up on single legs. He has a brilliant single leg takedown, and he's never really worried about finishing it, because he can always drop down underneath it and either go to what he calls Anaconda Guard, the single leg X, we'd call it, or change guard, or come back up again on the single like he did to, I think it was Nate Quarry. Just a terrific fighter to watch from the bottom. On top, it's either him or Jacare, best guard passer in MMA right now. If you went ever, you'd probably have to include like BJ Penn, Hatsuhikoki, people like that. But his guard passing is so slick. He does a lot of tripoding, which is where you keep your hips up high and your weight on the opponent. He does a lot of switching of his hips. That's one of his big ideas. Whenever you meet resistance, switch your hips over and see what happens. So he hits a lot of leg weave passes. He uses a lot of reverse half guard to threaten the Kimura or sneak his knee through into mount. Just a terrific grappler to watch. If you want to get better at grappling, rather than trying to watch the guys who are setting the world on fire with their berimbolos and things like that, watch Maia, because it's just gorgeous jiu-jitsu done right. Very simple too, simple but intricate, if that makes any sense. Condit is a wonderful guy when he works in volume. His kicking game he often gets accused of throwing quote-unquote leg jabs, but he really piles up the points with the kicks, and his big blows tend to come in combination. They're like the 3rd or 4th strike down the line. He throws himself out of position a lot. Like if you watch his fight with Thiago Alves, who's a guy who always comes right back to his guard from either kicks or punches. And if you watch him versus Condit will throw a kick and then he'll be out of position, and Alves will immediately be back in with a kick and knocking Condit's leg clean across him. Condit also uses that Holly Holm shifting run thing which has scored him a knockdown in the past, but also gives up the clinch really, really easily every time he does it, which is where he goes straight with his rear hand, uppercut with his lead hand, straight with his rear hand, and he sort of runs as he does it. And it's what Holly Holm was using against Valentina Shevchenko as well, and sort of running in ahead of herself and getting clipped or tied up every time she did it. It's not a very good combination if your opponent is going to step in on you during it, because you will be between stances. So if you watch his Condit's fight with Alves, he just keeps trying this and keeps getting either countered or tied up in a clinch. And then he finally connects it with the elbow instead and hurts Alves and starts to batter him with the elbows. Condit's elbows are gorgeous. Like, when he remembers to use them, they're the most fun to watch. His fight with Kampmann, he was rattling off like 3 or 4 elbows from the same side as he was trying to crossface his way out of a clinch. No idea what to expect in this fight. It's a 5-rounder, which is really interesting for Maia because he has... Last time he went 5 rounds was with Jake Shields. Oh no, sorry, he did go 5 rounds with Ryan Lafleur, but Ryan Lafleur, that guy, Ryan, he's not the caliber of opponent that Jake Shields and Carlos Condit are. He did fade, Maia did fade in the Rory McDonald fight. Obviously, part of that was Rory McDonald kicking him in the body, but then Carlos Condit's probably going to be trying to kick him in the body too. Even against very good grapplers like Rory McDonald, though, Maia has got the mount and or the back even against a lot of his opponents. Like, Matt Brown was doing great work hand fighting with Maia for when Maia was on his back. For 3 rounds he did it, but eventually the choke snuck in. So it's hard to know if a long fight favours Maia or doesn't, because he hasn't historically done well in them, but you would think that if he can keep getting on guys' backs, eventually he'll choke them. So that'll be interesting to watch. Elsewhere on the card, we've got Anthony Pettis versus Charles Oliveira. That's a great fight. That's one of those ones where you don't want to see one guy lose. Anthony Pettis is obviously in a bit of a slump. He's been sussed by the last couple of guys he's fought. Edson Barbosa did fantastic work against him in the most recent fight. Pettis was just looking a little bit limited in that fight. It was all his boxing was 1s and 2s. He wasn't throwing anything else, and then there was always a counter coming back, so he seemed a little bit afraid to throw anything else as well. But then combination work has never been his strong suit. His strong suit has always been being able to like kick straight out of his stance with almost no telegraph. So it's an interesting one. It's like, does he work on trying to apply that style he already has to more situations, or does he try and build a separate style to fall back on, one that's more combination based and so on? He works with Duke Rufus, who's a great combination fighter, so you'd expect him to at least have the training in that sort of stuff, even if his basic game is more 1 or 2 punches and kicks at a time. Charles Oliveira, who is back after his unfortunate esophagus tear. Oh no, that was 2 fights ago. He's fought Miles Jury since then. They guillotined him. Oliveira is brilliant from the front headlock. Anything like that, he's almost like Tony Ferguson. If you duck in on him at any point, he's gonna tie you up in some kind of head and arm choke or a guillotine. He works really well from the double collar tie. Has great elbows from there too. Decent kicking game. His issue has always been sort of a rocky chin. 3 KO/TKO losses in his career, but then one of those was a torn esophagus, and how often does that happen? But the other 2 were to Cub Swanson and Donald Cerrone. Lost that decision to Frankie Edgar when we were all thinking, what's that Frankie Edgar got left? And then he fought BJ Penn a 3rd time for no reason. We were all going, and then suddenly he got it all back on track and started looking amazing. Oliveira, obviously famous for the Do Bronx choke, as he calls it, which is basically an anaconda, but with the step over the back of the head like a Peruvian necktie. Really cool thing. Elsewhere on the card, you got Sam Alvey. He's one of my boys, versus Kevin Casey. Should be interesting. Sam Alvey, obviously, you're always looking for that counter right hook. Kevin Casey, you're always looking for the bitterness after the fight. No. Kevin Casey, obviously, a top quality grappler. Did really well against Keenan Cornelius in a pure grappling competition on short notice, so he's legit. Jim Miller versus Joe Lozon, which is the one that all the hardcores are excited about because their first fight was phenomenal. And then you got Paige Van Zandt versus Beck Rawlins, which is an interesting one because lots of people were like, Paige Van Zandt, she's done. She's done Dancing with the Stars now. She's off to Hollywood. But she immediately came back and got in a fight, and it's a legit opponent, so that'll be fun. Over on Spike, we'll have Bellator 160, which is Henderson versus Pitbull, which is Patricio Freire rather than Patricky. The featherweight one, basically. So Benson, who is another one of my boys, I love Benson, really cool guy. But he's gone from fighting a gigantic welterweight to a kind of smaller featherweight. It's a very strange thing they're doing with him. I don't know why they're doing it. The fight with Will Brooks would have been amazing if they'd made it while Will Brooks was still there. The fight with Michael Chandler would also be incredible. You know, they've got legit lightweights in Bellator who could be fighting Benson Henderson, and that would be good for the company, because either you got Benson Henderson top lightweight, showing that he's a top lightweight and that he's chosen to go to Bellator, or you've got Michael Chandler or Will Brooks when he was there, proving that they can hang with the guy who was the UFC champion for quite a while. So I don't know why they've asked featherweight to step in and fight him, but who among us can claim to know what Scott Coker thinks? Should be a good one. Obviously, Patricio Freire, his big thing's his left hook, decent jiu-jitsu. Obviously, he's quite a short-reaching dude anyway, but against Benson Henderson, who's a fairly big lightweight, he should be giving up some height and reach. Yeah, it'll be an interesting one to watch. I hope for the best for Benson, because of the fight that they threw him into with Koreshkov was just brutal. But then I also like the Pitbull brothers, so it's one to watch. But the rest of that card's not very interesting. One thing to watch out from Benson, which I really liked in the Donald Cerrone fight, which was just before the Koreshkov disaster. He was using that Andy Hug left kick to the opponent's rear leg. So he's a southpaw, and he was kicking with his rear leg into the meat of the opponent's rear thigh. Terrific technique. Andy Hug TKO'd guys with that. It was another one of those Andy Hug weird touches that made people do weird things that allowed him to land more ordinary techniques, like we talked about last week. The rear leg is very rarely as conditioned to taking punishment as the lead leg, even in top quality kickboxers. So it's a great technique. It just involves getting a little bit closer to the opponent and putting yourself in danger of getting counter left hooked or counter overhand righted or right straight down the middle. But as a low kick hurting technique, you probably got more chance of getting a stoppage by punting the back leg than you do of stopping anyone with kicks on the lead leg, unless they're especially bad at checking them. And obviously the other bonus is that if you can force the opponent to pick up their rear leg to check,